Welcome to The Kicker. I'm your host, Megan Greenwell. Today, my guest is Max Rivlin-Nadler. He's a co-founder and co-owner of Hellgate, the cool kind of offbeat publication covering New York City. And I wanted to have him on in the wake of the midterm elections in New York 2 weeks ago to talk about Hellgate's live broadcasts, which are unlike any election night broadcast I've ever seen. And I think you'll really enjoy hearing us delve into the details of how they come together. Max Rivlin-Nadler, welcome to The Kicker.
Great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I've been a Hellgate subscriber since I think day one. Big fan. And for those who don't know, since we do have audience outside New York, tell us who you are, what you do, and what Hellgate is.
Yeah, so I'm a worker owner, and that just means I report for Hellgate, and I also own the company. And Hellgate is a local news outlet started just over 4 years ago in New York City, meant to fill the void of good local alternative news reporting. So that means we do some irreverent blogging, but also intense investigations into local corruption, as well as a ton of culture reporting, something we're really expanding over the next couple of years. And on top of that, we get to do fun things like live streams, events for subscribers, etc. We're almost completely subscriber funded, although we have a bunch of support from outside, which we could get into a little bit later. But the whole idea is that the reporters own it and our subscribers provide the bulk of funding so we can be truly independent. And the whole idea was really to fill a void that was left in New York City by, the demise of the Village Voice, and, places like Gawker or a more voicey Gothamist that kind of filled the void of alternative press, and that just disappeared in a really short amount of time.
Can you tell folks a little about your background? Because it's a little bit different than some of your co-owners in a way that I find really interesting and brings something different to the site.
Interesting. I feel I'm a little similar, but maybe I was working previously before this for the NPR affiliate in San Diego, where I was reporting on the border. So I got to do a lot more radio and TV news, which was really interesting and actually got me really fascinated with doing things like live streams and podcasts and things like that. So that was I did that for 4 years. Before then, I worked at the Village Voice and at Gothamist, and then did nights at Gawker. So that part is way more similar to the rest of my colleagues. So we're kind of born from the same digital first cesspool, but then we all took different journeys. Although even my co-founder Chris Robbins also got a bunch of radio and media experience working at WNYC Gothamist. So it was kind of all of our varied experiences when we started putting together, like, is this a newsletter? Is this a Substack? Is this a website? And now we're like, it's a media company that does all of these different things, because along the way we kind of learned all of these different things. So, being a precariously employed journalist is not the greatest thing, but you do learn all these different skills because you have to mold into whatever role is available.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the TV part of your background that I don't know of anybody else on Hellgate that has that experience.
It was cool and got me like really excited and interested about like, okay, not in a Vice newsy way, although they did great work. It was just more of a like, you can at this point create really inexpensively produced, high quality, streaming in extremely high definition video with your phone, and with like very low tech things that otherwise, if you were working for a large TV news station, would take an extremely long way around the barn and use very expensive cameras and all that stuff for good reason. But you could create, very high quality video content kind of in your own backyard.
Mm-hmm. So I want to delve into the live broadcasts in just a second, but to set up Hellgate just slightly further, one thing that's interesting to me about Hellgate is there are a lot of places that like have no local news, right? New York is not one of those places. There is still other local news coverage, certainly less than there used to be. But how do you think of sort of Hellgate's role in the ecosystem And it does feel to me like it's playing a different role than anything else that is out there.
Yeah, I mean, Hellgate's role, part of it is a DNA from a previous era of blogging. So we're happy to blog. And, I think of it as a news outlet that, because we're so fiercely independent, we don't really hold any sacred values in terms of, like, you can't talk about this, or you can't write about this politician in this way, or you can't heavily imply something, even though it's right in front of you, or, like, you can't act shocked when the Adams administration is very corrupt. These are people we'd been covering for cumulatively decades, and when they came into power, we were like, oh my God. So we knew what was up. We didn't really have to waste any time to be like, okay, obviously there's a bunch of scandal in there, let's go looking for it. But this type of adversarial journalism that you don't really have to pull punches, I think very much has been lost during the shift away from independent digital media or independent corporate media, or not independent corporate media, but massive corporate media, to more nonprofit focused media, where they really they've ironed out the voice almost completely in an effort to be like, no, we're really important journalism. Journalism deserves to exist. It should be free. People shouldn't pay for it, and it should be done at the behest of the wealthy, because it's this public good. And you end up with good journalism that is extremely boring to read. So something that we really value at Hellgate is that we are all, I won't overly pat myself on the back, but everybody else in the newsroom is a very good writer. I love reading them. So you have these voicey, very good writers who, I always thought this was something that I saw at Gawker and Gothamist, is that have somebody who is just a bit more knowledgeable than you, and has spent the time to learn about a subject, explain it to you like they're your friend, and basically lay down, like, here's what's going on in this, and here's kind of how you should feel about it. And because we don't really have to waste any time with the idea of, like, you got to tell both sides here. We obviously are an adversarial journalism outlet, so we don't necessarily need to. We skew left on most things, but are happily all over the place on some others.
Yeah. Could you talk a little about what being an adversarial outlet looks like? And the reason I'm curious is because you guys started under the Eric Adams administration. To some extent, like, everybody was adversarial to Eric Adams.
Well,
like, he was wildly unpopular. He kept getting indicted, and everybody in his orbit got indicted. His politics, I think, to a lot of Hellgate's core audience, were kind of odious in some ways. And then all of a sudden, you have Zohran Mamdani, who I think to a lot of Hellgate's core audience is a much more palatable figure, is way more popular, is one of the most popular political figures in the country right now. So I'm curious, like, how you went about translating that adversarial spirit from the Adams administration to now the Mamdani administration.
Yeah, I mean, just lingering on Adams for a second, we started just a few weeks after he came into office, and I would say the media was actually quite flattering to Eric Adams, even from the jump. Brooklyn Biden, this is the new path of centrism forward. This is, the left is gone from the picture. And it really was the pits for the left at that time, with Biden triumphant. And so I think actually there was a lot of smoke for Eric Adams that we didn't buy into, not because we found him politically distasteful. And as a character, we loved him. Fantastic, incredible to cover. But no, just because we had covered him as Brooklyn Borough president and as a state senator for so long, we knew who was in his orbit. We knew what he was up to a lot of the time. When he made appointments, it wasn't that we would be like, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. We'd be like, we know this guy is an unindicted co-conspirator in a federal bribery case. And here we're going to publish all about it. And sure enough, when he entered the administration, pushed out a police commissioner, also up to no good, and obviously all these people got indicted. So I'd say it was like a slow burn for Eric Adams, and something that we really dove into with our Eric Adams table of success, which is what started as like, let's map out all the different connections this guy has to power players in New York City, and then just became like a 60,000 word catalog of everyone who kind of worked or orbited City Hall. But it was after, midway through his administration, really did things begin to snowball for him, and unpopularity, and the indictment obviously did not help at all. So we wrote a perfect storm in terms of coverage and subscriptions and attention, going from Eric Adams being indicted to Andrew Cuomo, our old favorite person to write about, who we were like pretty sick of writing about, but here he came back, and then of course you had Zohran Mamdani running in that race. So it was a perfect storm for like 2 years there of just fantastic things to cover in the city. We're talking scandals, horse race politics, debates, ads, people-powered movements, throw in the Gaza encampments in there too. We were really eating in terms of like things to cover and write about and interview people about. It was a fascinating time in New York City. Not to say right now is any less fascinating. The past month has been, I don't know, pretty insane.
Yeah.
And fun to cover. The shift to Zohran Mamdani, because, this is somebody we were just closer to. With Eric Adams, a lot of our reporting was a decent amount of outside looking in, talking to sources not at City Hall, sometimes inside City Hall, but a lot of it was pulling up documents, things like that. With Zohran Mamdani, we're like way more sourced, mostly because we'd covered him since he was an assembly member. We cover the Democratic Socialists of America. We cover local elections. The people involved in his campaign and the people who orbit around him are people we, like Eric Adams, have been covering for years, but as sources, not as necessarily as, targets of our own investigations. So, we had a whole retreat as how do we reorient ourselves to cover Zohran Mamdani, and how do we keep up the adversarial spirit? And I would say, there's another Room 9 reporter. That's where the City Hall reporters go, down the hall from the City Hall offices, from the mayor's offices and next to the City Council offices, who whenever we walk in always is like, oh, the House organ is here. And I give him a big amount of shit because I'm like, listen, man, we've actually run a lot of critical stuff. We were really critical in terms of these kind of budget gambits that Zohran Mamdani had played, which maybe paid off. We were really critical and remain really critical of his stance towards criminal justice issues, his continued support of police commissioner and billionaire heiress Jessica Tisch. Like the criminal justice stuff is something we, as a publication, have been laser focused on from day one. We have a brilliant criminal justice reporter, Nick Pinto. Katie Way does fantastic reporting on these issues. Like, this is something we are built to cover, and the fact that the left has pretty much run away from criminal justice and policing issues at large is something that we're like, we need to zero in on this and continue to cover this. So I would say we are just as adversarial to the Mamdani administration. We've gotten just as many angry phone calls from their press office. That's their job, to make angry phone calls. It just looks a little bit different because he's popular. We're not the ones propping him up. So is everybody else. So listen, and we get, man, when we run anything that is a clean hit on him or is slightly negative, we hear it from our subscribers, right? So we built up this like huge subscription base based off of like a lot of people who were excited to see what this new era in New York City would be. And yeah, we hear it from them. I wouldn't say that's resulted in any cancellations or things like that. We have a really active and like subscriber base who is really like has an affinity for us and wants to see us succeed. It's just like, hey guys, no, cut him some slack. And it's like, that's not our job.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Okay, let's talk about the live broadcast.
Yeah.
How did they start and when?
Yeah, so this goes back to your first question about my experience reporting. So I was at the KPBS station. It was called KPBS, which is the PBS and NPR affiliate in San Diego, which is cool because it's a dual license. I love that station. I had a great time there. And so it basically means you are producing a radio show and you are producing a evening telecast, which is actually very rare for NPR or PBS affiliate. So we kind of had to learn on the fly how to both put together radio pieces and TV pieces. And one thing that I kind of learned was you could put together really good produced packages or live broadcasts really from your phone. I was like reporting from Mexico. I was reporting like deep in the desert in the border, and I was still kind of putting out high quality broadcast journalism with the help of very good camera folks. But the technology to me was like, this is interesting. This is like cool that we could do this. Why don't more local news outlets do this? Some do, but definitely not in that part of the country. And then every year on election night, we would have a election special where we would do very similar things and have reporters all out in the field and, you know, have people back in the studio. And it got really high viewership. And to me, it was a lot of viewership on YouTube that I felt like was really different than the normal viewership for a PBS station, which is terrestrial, right? It's older people who have TV still, cable, or, you know, just a few channels and still get PBS. So working on that, I was like, man, I almost feel like we could put together something really low-fi and low effort and people would tune in. That's not what we ended up doing, but that was the like impetus of the idea, especially going into the primary where we just knew like May through June last year of 2025 was just the interest was off the charts. It was insane. People, anything election related, people wanted to read, which was, you know, a product of an exciting matchup between Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani, but also because it was, you know, the first year of the Trump administration. And I think people really felt this sense of hopelessness in local politics and politics at large. And they were ready to grasp on to pretty much anything as a sign of like hope or momentum.
How did you think about like doing a broadcast and keeping the Hellgate spirit in it? Because it does feel substantively different, and we'll link to the broadcasts, but like it does feel substantively different than any other type of election night broadcast I've ever seen.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, one thing is that we're right there with you. That's one thing that I really think a lot about the Hellgate perspective is like when we're writing about issues with tenants and we're writing about parks and we're writing about transportation, that's because we experience all of those things. And we don't want to hide that fact. It's not a view from nowhere. It's a view from New York City. So really expressing that visually through the live stream. And it is not a one-man show. We have incredible producers and director of photography and people who have like experience with live stream who really like came together. We did our first one for last year's primary, came together like 12 hours before in like really vital ways. And I had no idea really what it was going to look like. We were like, let's just start broadcasting. And if things completely fall apart here, you know, at least we gave it a shot. And, you know, it came together in such a way, I think, because the primary itself was so exciting and so interesting in terms of an outcome nobody really expected, that we were able to, you know, capture that excitement. Even our own broadcasters, you know, like we send out people into the field to different watch parties, and they were able to, you know, actually describe what they were seeing in a way that like they were in the heart of it. You know, we had Jesse Edwards like literally in the middle of people screaming out for like Brad Lander, even though he lost. We had, you know, Chris Robbins complaining about the AC at the Zohran Mamdani event. We had, you know, Adlin Jackson who had to live broadcast from next to a bathroom at the Adrian Adams event. Like all of these things really did work out and come together. It's a little cringe, me watching it now a year later after we did our latest one, because we figured so much stuff out since then, especially when it comes to the hardest thing at all when it comes to live broadcasting, which is sound. But, you know, the basic fundamental vibe remains the same, which is like you are there as a reporter. Obviously, you're doing a little bit of a spoof of a newscaster, but you're also giving your like vibes report. So, yeah, I feel like it's a little spoofy at the end of the day of like, this is what a live report on election night looks like, and we're going to toss it around. But then you think about like CNN and the shit that they're pulling off, and the stuff that they're pulling off. I'll give you an edit. I don't know whether I'm allowed to curse or not.
No, you're allowed to.
Cool. You look at CNN and MSNBC and all that stuff and the shit they're pulling off, and you're like, all right, is that any more outlandish than what we're doing? Is that any more like insane than going and somebody being like, yeah, you could hear the flushing of the bathroom because I'm right next to it, and like at least that's more truthful to the reality of it. Or like, yes, on the last week's live stream, we had Nick Pinto get on a bike because he was going between two watch parties, and we were like, let's just live stream you on the bike. You are a real person going around, and people are really excited for that, and fits the Hellgate ethos of, you know, there is a parasocial element to it. People know who we are and know our voice. But we also want to show people like this company is built because of support from our fans and people who really like appreciate our reporting. And you're going to see all the like blood and guts of it, including like when things don't work and when we decide to get really weird with it.
Yeah, so we're recording this a week after New York's midterm primaries. I watched a bunch of the Hellgate broadcasts that night, including Nick on the bike, which was so delightful to me. For most of it, like, you can really only see the underside of his chin because his camera's like below him. And he's also offering like super sophisticated, super smart analysis because he's one of the smartest, you know, political minds out there about New York politics. And it was just like, that felt to me like the perfect encapsulation of sort of keeping that kind of punky spirit while still just like being smart, which is cool.
No, it's cool. It's, you know, for lack of a better term on a journalism podcast, gonzo, right? Like, let's have fun with it. Let's act like we get access to these spaces because we are journalists, but we could also take a step removed and be like, what the fuck is this place? Like, you know, even when the place he arrived at was a victory party for a state senator that got out, like, this woman ran for state senate essentially purely out of spite because everyone around her hated this other state senator and just booted her from office. And like, it really was like the haters ball. And Nick got to describe it as such, being like, you know, is that it? Is that the end point of politics? Is like, you didn't like the personality and vibes of this woman, and so like you got rid of her? And we could say that in a way that's fun and knowing and like artful. And like, we, you know, Jesse Edwards, another worker owner here, during the Curtis Sliwa election, the general election, like every time we came back to her, she was wearing another beret in honor of Curtis Sliwa. So, and then she like revealed at the end that she had 6 berets, and we were like, Jesse, like, did you like, are you expensing these? Did you buy them just for, she's like, no, I own 6 berets. And we're like, wow, we've learned a new thing about our coworker today, and we'll have to sit with that, but we'll do it live.
We also have to talk about the illustrations and the GIFs, which were incredible. There's a GIF, again, we'll link to them, but there's a GIF of Brad Lander like rising out of a lotus flower, and there's one of Jack Schlossberg, the Kennedy child, getting tucked into bed. I mean, they're just so funny and weird and just great. So can you talk a little bit about like the brainstorming process for coming up with those?
Yeah, so all credit and power to Partner and Partners, which is another worker-owned company. It's really cool that we get to work with other worker-owned companies. They are a design firm, and they have been working with us now for over 2.5 years. They redesigned our website. They are now like, we're in an official alliance where they are our like design partners. So it really is like ideation, but they kind of make dreams come true. We sent them like a list of 10 like here's a goofy political idea. Like, can you have Dan Goldman on a pile of jeans being pantsed with a bunch of, like, setting a bunch of money on fire, which is essentially what he did with his campaign. And they were like, no problem. And just like, so they could do really cool things like that, but they're also incredible at, like, the visual identity, the graphics. Like, we had maps, scrolls, all of these things that make us look like, $1 million broadcast, which we are most certainly not. That, like, I think people watching at home are like, oh, wow, these guys really have their act together. They've put a lot of thought into this. So, yeah, that was one thing that was really responding to something we noticed during the general election was when we stepped up our graphics game, was when we put like a winner on the board or polls on the board. That's when people watching at bars and around the city would take screenshots, would like take photos, pose with it, and then post that on social media. And like we were getting a ton of social media followers, a ton of pickup from that. So we're like, okay, and we encourage people to watch the live stream at bars. We in fact like put out a list of all these bars that are showing it, like come and be in, community with other people watching local off-year election results. So before we're like, we're really cool, just a reminder that that's what we're doing and what we're talking about. Come to these bars and, we put on closed captioning, and then, a lot of people just take photos of these things. And so for this year's primary, we're like, let's just do way more graphics, because that's what we found people were really responding to. And like, sure enough, like tons of shares on it.
Mm-hmm. And you alluded to sort of the glow up that the broadcasts have experienced in the year they have existed. And I remember watching that first one, and it was, and I say this lovingly, it was kind of janky, right? Like it would cut out sometimes. The sound, as you said, wasn't great. It was like, it felt amateurish in a good way. And this year's felt punky, but I would say professional. So like, what was that process of evolution like?
Yeah, I think the first year was definitely, I think what helped the first year right off the bat was we were like, this is going to be public access television. Let's lean into that. Yeah. So when something fell apart, or when we're doing a visual gag, or like we could not hear our interview guests for the first half hour. Literally, we didn't know which camera to look at the whole time. So Scott Hines, who I'll talk briefly about in a second, would just like go and point to each separate camera that we were supposed to look at. Katie Broswell, our producer, she was like literally who came on board like an hour before we went on air, because she like was told what we were doing, and she was like, oh no, and like just ran over, because she's like, they need somebody who actually knows how live production works. And she was just holding up note cards and like doing all of this stuff to help us. So like the first broadcast I think really benefited from like, this is public access television, we're just having fun here. The second one, we like totally stepped up our game a bit more, although like issues remained. We were like, sound still not there. And then the third time around, we were like, first thing, huge credit, Ruth Ann Harnish, who helps us out with some funding and paid for a beautiful new studio that I am sitting in right now. And so we were able to, where we're going to be doing our live, we're going to be doing video versions of our podcast starting in 2 weeks, which we're really excited for. And so the whole thing of actually having a studio that we could build out, because before we were literally in a performance space in a warehouse in Bushwick, where we'd have access to it maybe like 12 hours before, and then everything had to be out. And, it was always iffy, like, will the internet work? Will it be air conditioned? Oh, they just told us the landlord is coming by to do an inspection like 2 hours before the show starts. Like stuff like that we just don't have to deal with, so we could really invest and take the time to get things right. So professionalizing the studio was a huge thing. And then also just like third, you work with a team 3 times in a row, you get better at things. Scott Hines, who's a longtime video guy, photography guy in New York City, does video for a lot of our live events. He really took control of the visual identity when it comes to the camera work and things like that. So we were really able to like actually build a dedicated space to things like this, which I can't recommend enough, and take the time to think through like, what is each segment of the broadcast going to look like? Who are we tossing it to? we had a script the first time, but immediately threw it away. And this one, we like pretty much knew what we were going to be saying, like coming in and out of breaks. We were able to pre-tape segments, which we'd never done before. Not like anything important, but like stuff where we were like, okay, let's like really get this done so that when it actually comes time, when the results are rolling in, we're prepared and not just like running around with our heads cut off. So it was really just bringing in both people who, Katie Broswell, our producer, comes from live, for the most part, sports broadcasting. So she really knows how to do live events. And then a lot of the rest of the team comes from the world of live streams and streamers, which is a totally different realm. And honestly, something that I think could do a lot more of this type of reporting. Like, you know, you don't have to go and create a cable news TV or a nightly news show to do polished local reporting. You can kind of do it as you would a stream.
I have to go backward because I forgot I had one more question about the graphics, which was you did this great like map with different patterns over different parts of the city. There was like a hammer and sickle over the commie corridor in Brooklyn and Queens. But the Staten Islanders in the Instagram comments were mad pissed at you guys because you had Staten Island with a motif of NYPD logos. For those who don't know, Staten Island is where a lot of NYPD cops live, is also the only Republican borough of New York City. Please tell me about your relationship with the Staten Islanders.
We love Staten Island. We've done a lot of reporting out there. Listen, we were having some fun, and when making jokes, you get some blowback. And absolutely shout out to Staten Island. It's obviously far more diverse than just cops. I think the Bay Ridge expansion into Staten Island for lefties all the way from South Brooklyn now to the North Shore and extending down through Staten Island will absolutely change it and make it much more competitive. I would say win some elections, guys. This was a political map. It was mapping who wins elections. Show me the first anti-cop person to win in Staten Island, and we will change the graphic. So we're not projecting things as you wish they would be, but in fact as they are, because we're news reporters, damn it.
All right, Staten Island, you have your marching orders.
And we'll cover it. We'll be there. We love going.
Yeah. Let's dwell on this election for a little while because I live in the commie corridor. I felt like in the run-up to the election, the vibes were like terrible, honestly. Like everything felt super toxic in terms of the discourse. We had the Brooklyn Borough president running against an assembly member who had been in the assembly, fairly recently, was a fairly recent transplant, Antonia Reynoso, the borough president, whatever. We don't have to get into all of the details, but in the aftermath of the election, there's been a lot of argument about, like, what does this mean? What does this not mean? Does this mean that, like, socialism runs New York City now? Does this mean, no socialist can ever win outside of New York City? Does this mean absolutely nothing because it was a one-off midterm? From the Hellgate perspective, like, what happened last week?
I mean, what happened last week, and we had our favorite political analyst to go to, Michael Lang of the Narrative Wars. He came in studio, and we went to him live during the telecast. And it's basically, listen, New York City's electorate has completely changed over, at the very least, the past decade, but definitely since the mayoral election of last year. And he was able to really point out that, like, if you look at the margins, especially in New York 7 and New York 13, where Darlisa Avila Chevalier defeated Adriano Espaillat, like, these were new voters who provided the difference, definitely in New York 7. And so, I think New York is getting, its voting class is getting younger, weirdly enough, as, like, especially during its Democratic primaries. Let's just confine it to Democratic primaries for now. It's getting younger and it's getting more diverse. I think a lot of people portrayed this as like the gentrifier class winning. And, if you look at the numbers, sure, in the sense that a lot of people who recently moved to New York are in their 20s and 30s. Traditionally, when people move to New York, time immemorial, traditionally, when you move to the, biggest city in your country, or like move from, we're also talking immigrants here, move from Central America or South Asia to the United States. That's usually when you make the trip. And they are really resonating with a politics that forefronts renters and affordability and cannot be discounted, the genocide in Gaza, which is a huge animating force. Like the through line between the encampments at Columbia University and City University, in Upper Manhattan, like that cannot be ignored as a 2-year through line directly to what happened in New York 13. And they were violently suppressed. We were reporting there at the time. We interviewed Daria Avila Chevalier. I think one of the first interviews she ever gave was just, here's this random person who's organizing on campus, and we talked to her. So that's cool to be old enough as a publication to be like, oh yeah, we talked to this person before they became a huge national story. I think it is a changing electorate. It is something we dove really far into in our exploration of the judicial system. Our recent big investigative piece, Courts of Contempt, was just how aging and frayed and still insanely corrupt these political machines remain. And they're no longer good at doing the one thing they're supposed to do, which is win local elections. So when you have really motivated young people who view these elections as existential decisions, especially when done under the backdrop of a genocide that the U.S., willingly abetted and funded, people are going to take this very seriously, and way more seriously than your side, which is actually, it's all good. Or, you know what, like, why rock the boat too much? And so, I think it certainly does not hurt to have Zohran Mamdani at the top of the ticket, this charismatic leader who is able to effectively communicate his political program, as well as offer like results and delivery on that, those promises that were, so outlandish at the time, but as we knew at Hellgate, actually like eminently doable. Or rent freeze. Bill de Blasio did that 3 times. These are not outside the realm of possibility. And the mayor is very powerful just as a position generally. So I think our takeaway from this is that, yes, it is a part of a large trend in New York City that is a changing electorate that will continue to deliver seismic election results. I don't know, everyone is like, a lot of centrist Dems are like, how do we stop this? And like, I don't know. The die has been cast on a lot of these issues, and unless you either adopt them or come up with a good reason for why you supported odious policies to begin with that like the electorate can no longer stand, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble, especially among areas that are reading the news, enjoying the city, understanding the larger forces at play, and most importantly, reading Hellgate to learn more about the city they live in.
Very smooth plug. I like
Yeah,
it.
Thank you. You always got to end with the plug. It's just like, oh, I'm ranting. Bring it back. Hellgate.
Yeah, nice. You briefly mentioned the Courts of Contempt project, which was, as far as I know, the most ambitious, like big, huge investigative feature that you guys have done. Talk a little bit about what that project was and what else you might be thinking about along those lines.
Yeah, so this project started when we were just dead convinced Andrew Cuomo was going to be mayor, and we were like, man, that's boring. Like, we're so bored of this guy. And so, when he's mayor, it's just going to be punishing. Let's dive into some real muck that we've been meaning to dive into for so long. So we started the process. We worked with Type Investigations, who's awesome funder of investigative work. We had done the Eric Adams Table of Success with them before. And the idea was this, which is that when you go to vote in New York City, you have to vote for something called a judicial delegate during the Democratic primary. If you lived in Brooklyn last week, you voted for judicial delegates and things like that. And, nobody knows who these are, and the answer is actually very, very complicated. Like, who is the judicial delegate? There's somebody who goes to a judicial convention to then nominate judges for New York City civil and criminal court, really important courts. Do they actually get to make those decisions? No. Shadowy local Democratic clubs make the decisions for them in really backroom ways that invite massive amounts of corruption, in the sense that a lot of the people who become judges have ties to Democratic County Party leaders, have thrown fundraisers for them. There's a ton of tit for tat. There's a ton of corruption there. And so we basically spent the better part of a year. I literally got a recording of one of these, secret meetings where they decided who will be the judges. I was standing outside of it, kind of looking through the glass the whole time. Luckily, somebody sent it my way afterwards. We talked to a million people on the record, off the record. We sat in courtrooms. One part of the project was kind of evaluating and looking at judges and how people who are the results of this corrupt system actually have an impact on people who live in New York City, and are one of the main reasons Rikers has still not been closed and is filled to the brim. So we wanted to connect. Here's this really obscure, arcane, and corrupt political system, and here is the real-time impact it has on New Yorkers, and how, people are trying to reform this and running up against a wall of just pure money, corruption, rulings, literally being tossed off the ballot, and other chicanery. That being said, last week it kind of looked like one of the big machines here, the Brooklyn Democratic Party machine, have been tossed. And there might be a group of reformers who will take their place. I never count them out, though. They're very canny. They've been defeated before and somehow clawed their way back into power. So, because there is a lot of money riding on this. So yeah, you should check it out. One really cool thing that we got to do is we made a print version of it, because the second it barreled past like 30,000 words, we were like, oh God, no one's going to read this on a website. So please, take it to a beach with you. We're selling it through our website, and it does have a very beautifully designed companion website by our comrades at Partner and Partners.
The ideal beach read.
No, please. Honestly, yes.
I mean, it's portable. It'll fit in your pocket. It's like, it doesn't matter if it gets sand on it. It's great.
Totally. Yeah. And you might be like, man, this weird Brooklyn Democratic Party functionary, I have a strange affinity for them. I think they've got vibes.
I love that.
And yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the realities of running a company before we close out. You all said in your annual report last year that you were making roughly $70,000 a month from 9,000 subscribers, and the growth had been pretty consistent since starting the website. Do you know, and it's not annual report time yet, but like, where are things now, and what are you looking forward to in the future?
Things are good. I would say there's definitely no matching, like I was discussing before, the fever pitch of the last 18 months. Running for an election is great for the news industry. From Les Moonves down, right? Anybody could tell you, like, it's good to have an election. It's less good, the first 2 years in office. So, it ebbs and flows. The line still goes up, though, at Hellgate. And so we are very close, or have already passed $1 million in annual subscriber revenue, which is like so sick. If I was blue skying this 5 years ago, as we were, like, with everybody just chilling in a garden being like, worker-owned news outlet, and then almost 4.5 years later being like $1 million annual recurring revenue would be like, sick. Very cool. So we're happy about that. Line goes up. Right now, subscriber funded is still around 70%. Outside funding is around 30%. that's very healthy. In my dreams, it's more like 80-20, just so we use the outside funding, which are, individual benefactors or grants or things like that, to like fuel growth. Like, okay, let's use that to make that higher and then replace the higher with revenue from subscriptions because we were able to expand our coverage. That's still the plan, and it's going well. And then, we have a huge sale coming up. I'll be the first to. You'll be the first to know. You heard it here first. On July 20th, we are doing a site redesign a little bit just to help more forefront the video version of our podcast. We're launching a culture newsletter that we're really, really excited about. Newsletters we didn't even get into, but have been actually a huge part of our business model right now. We send out a daily newsletter that's read by tens of thousands of New Yorkers every morning and has really become part of a lot of people's days. We feel definitely has become a part of our days. So, I think that sale should be really helpful. That's our big annual sale that has a very steep discount, which I will not disclose as of yet. But some of the items behind me will be obtainable through just paying a single dollar. So think about it if you like cool shirts. Yeah. And so, that's what we're up to. But financially, Hellgate is the state of the finances are healthy.
That rules. And I'll close out here. This has been, as has been often discussed, the summer of like impeccable vibes in New York City. The Knicks won. The World Cup is here. Pride was great. The political excitement is real. All of these things. I've probably forgotten 4 more. But tell me about how like that energy doesn't always last. Not every month is like Valhalla in New York City.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in how joyful Hellgate often is and like how you think about bringing that to the more banal months.
Yeah, I mean, it's been especially happy for us because literally right up until the Knicks playoff run, we were deep in working on Courts of Contempt, which was, again, a really arcane dive into the court system. A lot of sitting on court benches on like dreary February days. So like that's the opposite of, absolute bedlam in the streets and getting to like go cover the Knicks parade and like dap up Karl Anthony Towns. It's like, oh, am I dreaming? This is incredible. We keep the vibes going through really fun events that we do annually, because that's something that is great to have as a local publication, as we have a real connection to our subscribers. So depending on whatever level you subscribe at, a healthy portion of our subscribers get to come to things like we have a journalist battle of the bands every year, and the bands are good. It's not just like, oh, I get it, like these guys work for Politico and they have a band. It's like, no, the band rocks. So we do that. We have a holiday party. In terms of the journalism, like, there's never a dull moment. It's New York City, right? And there's always something going on. And that's, again, why we're so excited to be expanding our cultural coverage, is like, that is such an untapped market. I know it feels crazy to be like, the culture is not covered in New York City, but it really isn't. There's so many scenes that used to be covered by a place like, Paper, The Observer, obviously The Village Voice, which is all these load-bearing places that no longer exist. And culture didn't stop. Things didn't stop happening. So a ton of reviews, a ton of music festivals, a ton of films being shown. That's a great way to keep the excitement going. And yeah, it's New York City, man. There's never a dull moment. There's never downtime. I know everyone is like kind of reaching a point of like exhaustion that I could like really only like, it's like Mardi Gras. It's like everyone keeps waiting for like Ash Wednesday and it just never comes. It's like, hey, you have to go watch, the Columbia game in Jackson Heights. It's like, okay, honey. It's like, fine. I'll stay up till 2 a.m. partying with total strangers if I have to. But no problem. It's going to be like 1,000 degrees this weekend. So hopefully that'll zap us. But
it's true.
We are all nonstop good vibes party monsters in New York City right now.
I love it. Yeah, this weekend we'll all stay home and nap in front of air conditioners.
You should read about the tall ships in Hellgate. We're really excited about the parade of tall ships. So, yeah.
I saw this in my inbox this morning, but I actually haven't opened it. So I'm excited to go read about tall ships.
Get excited.
Max, thank you for doing this. Everyone else, please go subscribe to Hellgate.
Yeah, please check it out. Lovely to be here.
The Kicker is a production of the Columbia Journalism Review. Amanda Dara is our producer, and I'm your host, Megan Greenwell. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back with you in 2 weeks.